Today, you get to celebrate your inner litmus with Voyager, please. A hateful voyage through the Delta Quadrant. My name is Joseph.
And I'm your co-host, Peter.
And Peter, let's dive right in. What did we watch this week?
Season 6, Episode 14, Memorial.
I think this episode fucks. I thought it was excellent. I was like momentarily down on it when we were introing it for last week because Virtuoso had beaten me down so completely. And then I started watching this, and I'm like, "Oh man, I didn't remember that this was this good," and it was great. I sincerely enjoyed this episode, and it's a clear front runner right now for best of the season.
Oh no, I wouldn't go best. It was, to me, it was a good story, but it was an intense story and not exactly my cup of tea. But I respect it for what it was. This was a Braga story directed by Alan Crocker. I think that's how it's
Croker.
Crocker. It's a deep one, especially for season 6.
It's deep, and my baseline on these things, Peter, is that if you can get a good performance out of Garrett Wang, then you've done an excellent job with your episode. And they actually do get a good performance out of him here. And hell, this is probably like the best Neelix content we've had in quite some time.
Very long time. And that's, my takeaway thumbs up on this one is it's been a while since we've seen Neelix. It's been a very long time since we've seen great Neelix. And this is one of those episodes where I think everybody brings their A game. So, again, I respect it. It's not going to be my front runner for best just because the subject material, I don't know, it feels a little too heavy, but it's a good one. There's quality in the script. There's quality in the staff, the acting, and there's quality with the set locations they use.
I think that's all true. I think that heavy sometimes works really well for Trek, and that as long as this is sometimes food, it's excellent, because this is such an outlier when it comes to the seriousness of its content. I mean, like, we're coming up against an episode where it was literally a bunch of contemptible, tiny, nerdy, neckbeard aliens want to make the Doctor into a opera singer. I get it, right? It's a little different, but it's one of the more cinematic episodes of Voyager I think we've ever watched, and just how they frame things. It flows so much differently than a normal episode of Voyager. The cinematography, I can particularly point out the sound design. I think the music and effects are just extremely high quality in this episode, and it made the whole thing stand out.
I can't say the sound really stood out as anything crazy to me. Do you have any examples of where you were picking that up?
In the dream sequences or the visions or the remembrance of the event, the weapons fire is extremely sharp. The particle weapons fire, sometimes the phaser sound, it kind of sounds kind of this flat, it sounds almost sanitized. Whereas this felt like it was rounds being shot out of a rifle, it sounded more visceral, and it sounded heavier, and like when things hit, it had an impact. And then there was great use of discordant musical themes while they're in those same sequences, particularly with when something really distressing was happening, to heighten those kinds of moods. And it's not something that I ever remember about episodes of Voyager, because it is just so samey so often with the music and some of the intangibles of presenting their stories. And it just all stood out to me so much more in this episode, and it's what I think really made me fall in love with it.
So we open up on the Delta Flyer, and it's a full house. We've got Chakotay, Paris, Neelix, and Harry Kim. And we find out that they've been on a 2-week away team mission, which we'll later find out was scouting and resource gathering. What is the Delta Flyer? What isn't the Delta Flyer? Is it a place you want to spend 2 weeks? Did you know that it's a shuttlecraft that has sonic showers in a big cargo bay? Did you know it could comfortably sleep, well, maybe uncomfortably in this case, 3 people in a house cat? for 2 weeks. You can tell that there's some tension. Harry Kim acts like a real bitch, yelling at Tom about some dirty plates and tries to play it off as a, and I quote, biohazard.
I don't think leftover replicated lasagna is reaching that level there, Harry. Come on, bud.
Yeah, that's a real stretch.
Toughen up, bud. You've died.
Yeah.
Come on.
Since when do you care about biohazards? You're the one over there banging 90s space hotties without EMH permission.
I do like the frazzled look they give everyone. You know, their hair's kind of messed up. They look like they've been in these clothes a little too long. That you can see the stank, and I think that is the best way to put it.
We've all been there, man. We've all been in that minivan on the way to a convention with people you didn't realize that you didn't really want to be in the same car with for more than 4 hours. So you feel it. And it's Neelix who, as often the case, steps forward with the optimistic glass is half full attitude, and I found it refreshing and charming. And again, you know, I somehow miss Neelix, so it was nice to see him up and at him on this one.
They arrive back at Voyager. They dock.
Well, hold on before you get into that. They say, now there's a sight for sore eyes, and you see Voyager, and they're coming up behind it. And I put in my notes like, man, what are the odds of Voyager being okay? And I put 0.0%. It was such a setup to me that like, feral mountain lions had escaped the holodeck and taken the ship over, or everybody had come down with COVID and they're all knocked the fuck out. Like, when Janeway...
What if there's feral mountain lions with COVID? I mean, you know.
Sure. With
anything's possible.
Implants.
Yes.
You know, whatever. The Borg pixie dust got out of control. So when Janeway actually replies back in a chipper voice, I was like, no fucking way. That's the last thing. That's the first loop this episode knocked me through.
They land. They are greeted by the doctor, who's like, you need to all come for your checkup. And the rest of them could not at all be less interested in getting a physical from the doctor right now. Chakotay, Harry, and Neelix just want to sleep, whereas Tom is actually greeted by B'Elanna and is obviously very happy to see her, and they have more chemistry here in this moment than they do 95% of the time. I don't know if the actors were just in a good mood or whatever, but they seem to be more compatible here. You know, he's actually does in fact seem to have missed her. She seems to have missed him. They go back to their quarters. You know, B'Elanna says, I've got a surprise. Tom's like, is it one where we bang? She's like, no, but you know, maybe later. And they go in, and we find that B'Elanna absolutely deserves the Girlfriend of the Week trophy, because to show her appreciation for her boyfriend, she has used her cool mechanic girlfriend skills to build him a vintage television set. So, as she explains, she replicated the parts but assembled it herself. So she got a tube or whatever and created a classic wood-framed 50s television. Although in this case it comes with a remote control as a bit of dramatic license.
Yeah, man. Like, let's talk about the Tom Lana Balam. I don't know what the right way to
Tom Lana, yeah.
Tom Lana. We know that Tom is a piece of shit, and Tom will continue to be a piece of shit later in this episode in regards to their relationship. But like, is the shittiness a one-way street? I'm trying to think of situations where she has been a bad girlfriend, and I'm not really coming up with anything. Like, she's had personal strife she's had to deal with, like her PTSD episode with the Cardassian murder cave Extreme Risk. And she was a little withdrawn, but I'd say Tom didn't really try the best to reach out and console her. And, you know, she's never interfaced directly with a homicidal shuttlecraft and like tried to kill him. So I think this is like 100% Tom is the bad part of this.
I mean, recall in that episode where Tom decides to hook his brain into a literal murder machine, that it is B'Elanna who risks her life to save him. It is 100% that B'Elanna is the good part of this duo, and Tom is always the shitbag. But that's very common in Star Trek relationships for the most part. The guy is usually always awful. In DS9, they write their relationship stuff a lot better and with a lot more maturity, and as a consequence, it's not quite so one-sided. But in every other Trek show, it's just they always fall into this weird rut where the guy is always just kind of an asshole, and Tom is 100% the bad part of this relationship. Because, man, could you imagine like coming home and like, I thought so much of you in your absence, I built you a vintage television set from scratch
with my replicator rations, which are flowing pretty freely by all the popcorn and beer that they replicate there.
And programmed it with television programs from the database, so you can like turn it on and like, it's like, you know, I built you an SNES Mini from scratch. Wow. You know, like, here you go.
It's a cool chance to see around Tom's quarters. Tom, I'm wondering if they moved him into shittier quarters once he was demoted from lieutenant, because he does not have any exterior windows, which probably sucks. But he's got some interesting accommodations, right? All of the furniture in his quarters is very clearly dated to like...
It's retro. Yeah.
Real retro. So he instantly sits on his ass in front of the TV. She's got the popcorn. He's got a beer. He tries to, like you said, one-up her and be like, oh, well, actually, they didn't have remotes back then. And it's like, oh, Tom, is there anything that you don't know between Mars missions, Fort Knox, combustion engines, crack shot piloting, warp fields,
ocean exploration?
Oh, yes, of course.
Don't forget that.
CRT technology, that's cathode ray tube. Like, shut the fuck up, Tom. Eat your popcorn, drink your beer, shut up.
I want to appreciate on a personal level that one of the television programs that comes on is the old Untouchables TV show with Robert Stack as Elliot Ness, which I used to watch with my grandfather. I forget what cable channel that they would run those reruns on, but put it on once when we were watching. I was hanging out at their house and was like, oh, you need to watch this with me. And I totally got into watching as much of the Untouchables with Robert Stack as I could find later on in life. That warmed my nostalgic heart to see that. I imagine that was just some shit that they owned because it's Paramount or whatever, but good job, guys.
So Tom's watching this, flipping between channels. B'Elanna's already passed out. I like the dejected girlfriend look she gives, which already starts lending credence to Tom being a shitbag in this episode, as he immediately ignores her and completely is absorbed by the television programming he's watching. And as he's flipping around the channels, he gets to this war movie with laser guns, which he doesn't seem to care for and tries to move off of it. And the more you watch it, the more you see that it's very much out of place. And then you see him participating in the war itself, and he starts looking at B'Elanna like, are you seeing what I'm seeing? But she's still sleeping. And eventually he gets shot on the TV, and B'Elanna ends up waking up while he's sleeping on the floor.
Method by which they start to convey all of the flashback / memories that we're ultimately going to see in this episode, I thought was very clever, as I mentioned in the opening, because it kind of always segues in from whatever the person was doing into the memory, but it's different each time. It's not like the same pattern repeating. So for Tom, it was taking the form of, I'm engrossed in my television programming, and now I'm living through this experience on this planet with this battle. Later on, we'll see Harry go through a circumstance where he comes overwhelmed, being in Jeffrey's tube and feeling claustrophobic. Chakotay is having dreams, but he's the dream warrior, so it doesn't bother him as much.
Yeah, he's a real champ through all of this.
Neelix actually has probably the strongest reaction, and we'll get to that, but very cool. They took time to try and craft a way to introduce the impact of all this on each character in a very different way that kind of meshes with their personalities, I think, in a fashion that took some care and some craft.
The most extreme version of this, of course, being Neelix, who is visibly distraught. And then Naomi Wildman comes in and starts bothering him, so he gets even more wound up, which my heart goes out to him. So he's got this big, wicked-ass looking knife he's cutting potatoes with, and she just keeps pestering him. And I'm like, oh man, is Neelix about to shank Naomi Wildman with this thing? Like, there's some real Chekhov's gun going on here. I hope he gets her. Come on, Neelix, let's do this, man. Let's go there. And that's not quite the way that plays out. What happens is, instead of just stabbing her with a knife, he kind of takes her hostage a little bit with a friendly phaser fight there in 10 forward, or the mess hall, with security. But he's not holding her hostage. He's trying to protect her. He believes that there is a conflict. He's getting his own flashbacks. He thinks the children are in danger, and he has moved into a defensive position.
I cannot speak any more highly about Ethan Phillips' acting ability than this scene you're describing. Like, it goes from Neelix being a little off but very Neelix-y to just an absolute crazed maniac who is desperate and fighting this weird phaser battle with a very confused security team, including Tuvok, who's like, what the fuck is this? And while they're just confused, he is possessing that moment of panic of like, I need to defend Naomi from these attackers, right? Like, he's reliving this traumatic experience of this battle, and he's there, and you get that the character is there because he's doing such a good job of authentically being in this panicked mode. And that's what's like ties together him and Garrett Wang in this episode too. This is what Garrett we'll see later on, kind of like him kind of go whole hog on it, but like that is really just so hard to do, right? To like really make the viewer think like that your character is traumatized. I get that here. I 100% get that from him here.
As far as the little hostage situation goes, I have to wonder why they wouldn't just beam Neelix into the bridge, or like beam the phaser out of his hand. Or, I mean, obviously they're trying to create a tense situation, and ultimately it's Chakotay, everybody's favorite emotional advisor, who comes down and he talks Neelix off the ledge using some in-character reasoning, because as you mentioned, Chakotay has also had his memories of what's going on here, and he gets Neelix to back down, and they all end up going back to sick bay, where everybody had foolishly blown the doctor off, who had requested they take their initial physicals per Starfleet protocol. And you find out, once you know it, there is something afoot, and they seem to be in this shared memory event. And I like the way that they carry this mystery forward, because, and even Janeway will call out, this isn't the first time that our memories have been altered.
Yeah, I mean, that was an excellent thing for her to immediately bring up, is just because you have a memory of something doesn't mean it actually fucking happened. We've been fucked with a lot, so let's get to the bottom of what's occurred.
A lot of doubt, okay, well, Tom remembers getting shot, and if they can edit our memories, and they can probably cover up our wounds. Is this a false memory that's been planted? Is this a shared experience we actually partook in and none of us remember? And again, there's a lot of, I don't want to say retread, but this is a story that we're familiar with in Voyager, both in terms of Voyager crew members being co-opted legitimately into ground war, which was what's the one with the Predators where Chakotay gets co-opted into fighting in Vietnam?
And that's the one with where they talk in that weird iambic pentameter sing-songy way.
Oh, that's right. I hated that episode. Yeah,
you did. and I liked it. And yeah, it was like, think of your mothers and your sisters with your footfalls.
Stop.
Yeah.
Listen, I just went through Virtuoso. Don't drag this shit out right now. All right. So you've had these situations where Voyager crew members have legitimately been involved in foreign conflicts as unwilling participants. You've got Planted Memories, if you'll remember. I think it was actually called Remember. That was the one where the telepathic race that played the blue ball guitar, and the one lady was like pumping B'Elanna full of sexy dreams.
Oh yeah, that's the one with Senator Kelly and the Nazis versus the Gypsies.
Yeah, where they're burning them at the stake. And I want to say there's a couple other ones. So this is touching on a lot of themes that we have seen Voyager involved in. So they do what any reasonable crew would do, and they say, let's fly back towards the thing that made everybody else sick and see if we can't discover what's going on. But for the people who were involved, specifically Tom, they are not having a good time.
We've mentioned, Tom has this flash of this circumstance, wakes up from what he thinks is a dream. Harry Kim is in a Jeffries tube, starts feeling claustrophobic, starts hearing voices. Neelix has a whole, episode where he is reliving this traumatic event, is shooting at Tuvok over it and holding Naomi Wildman a hostage, who's very, very concerned about what's happening.
I want to interject just real quick. The misstep in this episode for me is specifically in regards to Neelix, who has had combat experience, who has carried the shame of being a deserter. And I think there was a really great opportunity for the guilt of his military career during the invasion of Talix and what he was forced to deal with in these memories.
I do think they pay that off, though, at the end, a little bit. We'll get to that. Let's hold that thought. I want to talk about that more when we actually talk about the last full scene of the episode. Want to circle back first, though, to Chakotay, because we mentioned he's like a real bro through this whole thing. He's essentially unaffected by these memories on an emotional level. He is able to act rationally throughout the entire episode without incident, despite the fact that he is going through the same thing everyone else is going through. And they don't explain why. It's just he seems to be far more centered just on a personality level. It's all implication, whereas everybody else is just not as sure of themselves as Chakotay is.
Maybe. Or maybe years of being a Maquis and working around Lon Suter. Chakotay's seen some shit. And maybe what happened on the fucking planet of, Killy Prime or whatever it was, it doesn't really compare to the stuff he's really been through. But, joking aside, he had to come to terms with jungle Vietnam, with what'd you call those guys from Warhammer?
Yeah, the Catch and Jungle Fighters.
That and all the legit experiences that he had in the Maquis and that terrorist guerrilla lifestyle, him fighting for his life with the Borg colony,
holding down Cardassians for Dolby to murder, just
Chakotay's seen some shit. He's been training for this, and it shows.
That's probably the correct answer. It's just he's a little bit more I don't want to say jaded, but just a little desensitized to it all, so that it's not affecting him emotionally as much. But I prefer to think that his Dream Warrior powers kicked in.
Now, interestingly, out of the entire group, the only person who has a real emotional support network in place, because everybody else is a bachelor with ostensibly no friends, is Tom, who's got B'Elanna. And Tom, as normal, is acting like a complete miserable bitch. He is not taking these events well, which I appreciate, because at the end of the day, especially the true Starfleet people, they are good people who do the right thing at great cost to their own personal safety. So to have these memories of being Death Squad participants should be a hard concept to swallow. But B'Elanna, she's trying to talk sense to him and saying, hey, can you just for a minute entertain the fact that maybe these aren't real memories that you did, and maybe this blood really isn't on your hands. And, Tom just thrashes about emotionally blowing her off. And she's like, all right, well, you know where to find me. Peace out, bitch.
To be clear, B'Elanna is trying to be super supportive Like, no questions. Like, hey, I brought you more TV shows. She's not like saying, hey, get over it, right?
Mm-hmm.
She's not
She's
like
not like,
trying.
let's burn some incense and get this out of here. Like Janeway's real matronly, motherly advice to her.
Yeah, this is some real, I'm trying to empathize and console, and I'm going to offer distraction. I'm going to offer some sound advice. I'm going to offer my emotional support. When I say B'Elanna's girlfriend of the fucking week, it is not it's just on every level, right? Like, she is trying hard here, and Tom's is being an ass. And it's like, you don't deserve her, dude. She needs to move on. You do better with Harry Kim. Come on.
Yeah. Yeah.
End of story. They have a great scene in the briefing room where things really come together, where you get the kind of full picture of what happened and what these memories are. And we get these flashbacks are about this alien race that we haven't seen before, that, you know, naturally have weird shit on their head because this is the Delta Quadrant. The characters are in the flashback, like they're present, but it's clear from the flashbacks that they are not themselves, that they're playing some role of someone else in that circumstance. There's no hint that the person that you're seeing here is Chakotay or is actually Tom or is actually Harry. They're just kind of playing these NPCs. To the credit of the Voyager actors in the briefing room, as they relate what's happening narratively and then they cut back to the flashbacks, they are very much living in the moment as if it was something that really happened to them. And I thought that was well constructed. So again, it's one of those intangibles of the construction of the episode, the cinematography, the narrative choices, and how they frame all of that just stood out so much to me.
And the inclusion of gun battle drama, gun battle action and boardroom drama. This briefing room scene you're talking about, I consider to be the first of two, what I called 12 Angry Men moments that this episode has.
Yeah, that's good reference, Peter. Very good reference.
Like, everybody has a different viewpoint that was involved in the altered memory event. And everybody's viewpoint is fiercely defended by the person who's been afflicted by it. Nobody really takes a passive role, and everybody is very traumatized by what they see, or very firmly rooted in their understanding. Like you said, Chakotay kind of sticks out a little bit as an outlier since he's not subject to the throes of passion on it, but he is pretty firm in his declarations through this.
The standout in this scene is Garrett Wang. His NPC in this circumstance has a really traumatic encounter with so the crew that they're supposed to be part of is essentially trying to relocate a group of colonists. I don't recall any of the alien races mentioned in this episode, but it's alien race A, of which they are part of the NPC crew, is trying to remove alien race B. The intention is to do so with force, but without hurting or killing anybody. So this is a forced relocation, but the purpose here is to not actually hurt anyone, to just like, all right, get on the transports and get out of here.
Now, I will point out that this militant force that is relocating the colonists, I did not observe any standing collars. I did not get a chance to see the boots, but this adds to the mystery, like, who's the real bad guy here? Because as you know, in Voyager, if they don't have that standing collar, they're not actually space Nazis. So it's a hard call.
Yeah, we don't get background on this race or the other race at all. We have no context for what happened here aside from this group is trying to force this group to leave, but they're trying to do it without actually hurting them. And what we find out is that a group of Alien Group B is taken exception to this, has armed themselves, and there is a firefight that breaks out as during the evacuation at night, and it's when Alien Group A and B are intermingled with each other, and the natural fog of war sets in, and you start to see a slaughter of all of the civilians by the military group as they panic about who's shooting at them and why. It's definitely a throwback to actual, Vietnam era war atrocities. This is what, not one in specific, but generally speaking, this is what they're trying to portray. The jungle background of it, the civilians that are not involved in the conflict while others who have armed themselves, the fog of war preventing people from knowing which is which, and then the reaction of the individual people involved.
So like you mentioned, Harry Kim's character that he's portraying is somewhat of a deserter. He runs away from the conflict and ends up in a cave network where he finds two people who had been hiding, tells him he wants to get out of there. And one of them is an old man who, as Harry is going to leave, falls. So he guns them both down to great personal shame. Tom's just a G.I. Joe who gets winged. Neelix's character is one of the military guys who finds heavy moral objection to the danger it's putting the kids in. And then Chakotay is kind of a leadership type who was advising the main guy, Savdra, and points out like, hey, everybody's tired. We need to rest. You're going to be dealing with a trigger happy mess. And the guy downplays it.
All classic war crime tropes from the Vietnam era. Just watch any movies from that time period or tries to encapsulate that time period, and you see this all the time. I do love the stuff that goes on with Harry Kim where he's panicked. The old man makes a sudden movement. He guns both of them down in a quick movement, and then you cut back to the briefing room and he is fucking losing his mind, right? Because as far as Harry's concerned, he did that shit, right? Like, this is real memory in his head. He murdered those two people. It's as real as day to him, and you buy that in that moment from him. And that's like the second time in 6 years that Karen Wang has convinced me of anything he's doing on screen. So, all right, that's check mark number 2. Good job. Get one more, you'll get a free sub at Subway. Good job, buddy.
Here's what I'm convinced of is these goddamn wrist-mounted flashlights are the worst idea ever. He's digging around the cave. He's got this rifle. What's interesting is they're wearing their Starfleet uniforms. They're not in the native uniform of the offensive force. They've got foreign rifles, but he's got that Starfleet issue wrist flashlight. So he's like trying to point this rifle at this old man and this girl while also point the rifle. So it's like he's got the rifle, one arm tucked under his arm, and then he's got the flashlight. It's a terrible process. Throw these things in the trash. I hate them every time I see them. End rant.
You have literally been complaining about those in season 1.
They're ridiculous.
That is some strong Voyager Please continuity right there. It's for you, the viewer.
They're awful. More of the crew, as they approach the system that the Delta Flyer had been surveying, starts to come under the influence of whatever is going on here.
The vision, by the way, is of Group A killing all of Group B. They kill 82 civilians. That's the number that's put on it.
Yeah. They're in astrometrics trying to go over the data from Delta Flyer, and there's the first planet, then there's the second one, which I thought that was kind of a cute scene with I don't know. Anytime I see Voyager interact with like Delta Quadrant merchants, I'm always interested in what those interactions are. So this guy's trying to sell him the elixir of life, but really it's great boot polish. And then there's the third planet, which instantly Janeway recognizes. And that's the clue that there's that maybe this wasn't a conflict that the Voyager crew members actually got pulled into, that these are imprinted memories. And Janeway starts to hallucinate. Does she have her full-on hallucination at this point?
Yeah, she does. So she starts to live through the circumstance. The part of it that we see from her perspective is the leader, Savdra, vaporizing the bodies after the massacre is over to try and cover up the evidence that they did anything.
Now, this is some Seska level shit here, right? You've got dead civilians, and this dude's just got a phaser rifle on disintegrate, and he's popping corpses.
And Janeway, as her NPC, objects of like, what the fuck? This is insane. We did terrible things here, and now you're trying to just eliminate all of the evidence? Like, what's wrong with you? And he's like, yeah, we're going to eliminate the evidence, and everyone here is going to shut the fuck up about what happened. And the other NPCs train their guns on Janeway, and she, like everyone else, is living in the moment of the scene where she is, fucking absolutely beside herself with both grief and rage that she was party to this, and now everyone seems to be in on a plan to cover up their crime. It's like, we murdered these people. Like, everyone just goes 110% on this, and Camo Crew's no exception.
I will say that the guy they have playing the main military leader, what's his name?
Savdra.
This dude's flat. This guy sucks. I don't know if you're supposed to feel hatred towards him or disregard or what, but this guy cannot hold up his end of the bargain, and he's got so much emotion around him, and that's, I don't know.
He doesn't matter. I just don't care about him, right? Like, what I'm caring about is how this is traumatizing the people we do care about, and that's cool. That's fine with me. I didn't need that guy to come big in those scenes,
I think if he would have, though, it would have added a lot, but whatever. So they, instead of just getting the fuck out of this system, Janeway, as always, continues to endanger the ship and fly deeper in. She comes out of her hallucination, passed out in the mess hall, which has now been converted into a triage center, and we see that there's a large portion of the crew which has come under the effect of these false memories. They got to get to the bottom of it. We also get a good scene here with 7 of 9 and Neelix, where he's very distraught at what he's done. 7 tells him that Naomi Wildman's worried about him, and he's like, no, I don't want her to see me like this, not like this. I feel bad. I terrorized her.
This might be like my favorite 7 of 9 scene in a long time. They've gotten better at judiciously using her. As we've noted, it was the 7 of 9 show there for a while.
A whole season.
They've really ratcheted that back, which is nice. And she doesn't factor very greatly into this episode at all. This is her really biggest scene, and it handles her character in a much more deft fashion, because the upshot of her conversation with Neelix is Neelix straight up asks her, like, you did terrible things as a Borg. Do you feel bad about that stuff? And she says, yes, of course I do. I helped assimilate billions of people. I have to live with that guilt every day. And she conveys it with a sense of actual emotion that seems correct for her, like, it isn't, too overwrought. It isn't too robotic. It's that soft kind of, I'm learning how to be a person, and yeah, I do feel bad about this. And she conveys to Neelix, like, me living with that guilt is how I remind myself to never do those things again, because I know the terrible consequences of those actions now. And I thought that was really cool.
This follows a cohesive story that they've been telling. The same question was posed to her early into her integration with the ship, B'Elanna being shitty and like, you're a mass murderer, assimilation, this and that. And her stance back then was like, yeah, so what? I was Borg, that stuff happened. And especially really this season, there's been this redemption atonement plot that she's been following. You go back to Dragon's Teeth, her jumping the gun and waking up the space Nazis, because she has this impulse to not follow down, to undo some of the harm she's done. And I'm hesitant to give credit to what the hell is Borg Shanty Town?
The Dragon's Teeth?
No. The one where fucking Paris has a phaser rifle on the Borg Queen, or I'm sorry, the shuttlecraft on the it was Janeway who put the phaser down.
Oh, Dark Frontier.
But it was the same deal there, where she was forced to confront her assimilation history and like really formally rejected the entire notion at that point. So that's good. And she even goes the extra 10 yards here and has made a little dessert platter for Neelix to try and cheer him up, which initially he's not interested in because he's so guilt-ridden, but once he discovers that there's chocolate in that terra nut souffle, maybe he will have just a little bit. And I thought that was very entertaining.
The fact that 7 of 9 went out of her way to not only make Neelix's favorite foods, but then like make a personal change to one of the recipes to potentially improve it for him, that speaks volumes as far as her advancement as a person, right? Like, she's not overly emotional, but she is definitely making connections with people in a way appropriate to her ability to make those steps and to realize that growth. And that's why I really like the scene. Like, it does so much for the ongoing story of 7 of 9 in relation to this story in an appropriate way without dominating what's going on. So many things about this episode that are just like, this is the sort of high quality production that if Voyager could have maintained, it would have been 10 times the show that it has ultimately been.
So they get to the planet in question, and you get this little walkie talk towards a transporter room, and it's Janeway and a bunch of other bridge crew guys and phaser rifles everywhere, and then there's like a random no-name gold shirt, and you're like, okay, well, this guy is definitely gonna die. That's the second time I was wrong about this. First time was thinking that Voyager would be helplessly adrift, overrun by I don't know, whirling dervishes or whatever, and the second time was thinking this guy was gonna die. Voyager comes in hot. Red alert, shields up, weapons charged. They send down the away team party, which may as well be an attack force. There's compression rifles all over the place.
They are getting ready, like they're going to beam down to the president of this planet. They are that well armed. They're going to beam directly into his office because, like you said, compression rifles. I didn't see any pipes, but
yeah. Short of bringing a tri-cobalt device down, I don't think there's any more firepower they could have leveraged. I'm sure they all had boot knives. So they beam down, and the planet looks, perfectly beautiful, Southern California. No signs of the settlement. They start searching around. Harry Kim takes half the away team party over to the cave network that he knew about, while Janeway and someone else go wandering off towards a power signature that they were picking up.
What we find is essentially an obelisk that has a lot of hieroglyphics on it.
Yes.
and a glowy ball at the top. It looks very reminiscent of a similar looking structure from the original series. And there's a side sort of hunt that Tuvok and Harry go on where they find the caves that Harry thinks that he killed these two people. And when they get down there, it's just skeletons and dust. And Tuvok says, yeah, these people definitely got shot here, but it was 300 years ago. You definitely did not do this. Like, yes. Calm your shit down, son. You're not responsible.
Which still, how hard would it have been for someone in that role to go back and where you think you just killed someone a few days ago and find the remnants like that.
I did want to bring up Tuvok, though, specifically because they never say that he wasn't affected by this, but they imply it because he never seems to have been affected by it. The doctor says, a third of the crew is feeling the effects, but says everyone's been affected. So you kind of get the impression that a lot of the crew members are going through having these memories. But Tuvok seems to be not either not affected by it, but maybe experiencing it or not experiencing it at all. He's cold the whole time.
Here's the deal, Joe. Whereas Chakotay was able to fare these memories well because he has worked with the serial killer Lon Suter, Tuvok put the serial killer Lon Suter in his brain. And as we saw in his dirty back alley grinder random thoughts episode, he's got some pretty naughty stuff banging around up there. So whatever this jungle nom simulation is going on here, that's a drop in the bucket to the fucking literal stock footage event horizon hellscape in Tuvok's brain. So yeah,
That is an excellent point.
Mhm.
Like, he has definitely had the craziest motherfucker that was ever on this ship in his brain, and it was his idea.
Yeah.
So
You
yeah,
see,
maybe
that's
he just like, yes, murder. I'm familiar with these emotions. Yeah.
you see, that's the trick, Cap. I'm always thinking about murder.
And here we are just years later, and Lon Suter is still just paving
Yeah.
the way for these fools, man.
Yeah.
Like, he's murder Lon and murder heaven. You just keep flying with those angel wings, bud.
Yeah.
You
Fuck you.
fucking did it. Fuck you, Jerry. Jerry Taylor. You cost us the best of us.
The two best, man. Seska too. R.I.P. Burn Queen. So we find out the story here is that presumably despite the efforts of the military faction vaporizing the evidence, that this would all eventually come to light, and whether it was the military side as an apology or the victims, somehow somebody creates this memorial, and instead of just having some statues and some writing, they make a crazy mind control device that is able to influence the entire fucking solar system.
Yeah, they call it a synaptic transmitter. And it's essentially beaming out to everyone the memory of what happened and forcing everyone who comes in range of it to relive the experience. As the inscription on the obelisk indicates, just telling you about what happened is not at all sufficient for understanding what happened. And someone along the way decided, well, we're just going to make people relive it because fuck you. and and the last big scene of the episode is the second 12 Angry Men moment, which is when they decide what to do. Do they shut this down? Do they allow it to naturally run out of power, which is revealed will occur if they don't fix it? Or do they restore it to its full working operation? And this is where I think Neelix's perspective gets paid off well. I know you don't agree, but he is the passionate advocate at the end here for keeping this thing running, and specifically links it back to what happened to Rhinax and the war that engulfed his planet and murdered everyone, except of course that Voyager didn't bother to stick around long enough to restore everyone to life, and Jatral, but whatever. We're just gonna breeze past that one more time. But to remind everybody, his planet was the moon that was around Talax, and it was destroyed by essentially a space nuke. And this horrible, horrific event was visited upon the Talaxian people. They lost this war. A lot of people lost family members, and he's got a personal experience with a war crime and a tragedy and the loss of family, and he has that felt experience that comes from that. And as a consequence, he's like, I get what this is trying to do, right? This is trying to make people know that this thing happened, and to teach the lesson of why it was terrible to anyone that comes by. And because he's had that experience in his own life, now that he's had a chance to sort of understand the context of what he's experienced, he's like, yeah, we need to keep this thing running because this shit is bad, and these people deserve to be remembered, even if it's in this terrible way.
So I'm totally team Chakotay on this one. But Chakotay's like, yeah, we need to shut this shit down. Like, what happened was bad, and some sort of memorial is good, but what is ostensibly a weapon that is inflicting these miserable, guilt-ridden images of mass murder and desecration of corpses isn't really cool. That you're just blasting everybody, regardless of their intent, who comes through the solar system. And Tom's, pretty keen to this idea of shutting it down as well. But Janeway's like, no, we're going to keep it up. And
I'm totally with you, by the way. Like, the correct answer here is to turn it off, right? Like,
turn it off. Maybe put a little holodeck down there and some candles or whatever. But like, this thing is a real problem. And if there's anybody who should be able to, Janeway has kind of a compromise, like, we're going to put a distress beacon out, alerting people that this thing's out there. Had this thing influenced everybody in like a mile radius, that's one thing. The entire goddamn solar system, like, this is a weapon of mass destruction in its own regards. And without any sort of pretext, like, you will now see the story of our people, and it will take 5 minutes to remember this. Maybe it's just plaguing people because it's fucked up and not working correctly. But like, if there's anybody that should understand, like, hey, what if there's a busted ass ship that's limping along looking for resources, and it's like, well, here's this fucking catch-22 of like, there's a really nice planet with some good stuff on it, but you're gonna be subject to this terrible psionic devastator.
It wasn't an option provided for in the episode, but the correct answer, I think, here is fix it, but also make it so that it only turns on if you specifically like go and press the like, I wish to experience the brain melting power of murder button. Like, I think I get the point of like, we need to leave this active so that the memorial that was intended to teach this lesson about what, why people can never forget the loss of life here and the circumstances that led to it and the very human reactions that led to it, so that you don't do it yourself. Cool, right? Like, I get that, but the problem is what you're pointing out is it's like, it's possibly just fucking up the lives of anyone who happens to wander by, maybe even getting them killed as a consequence of this horrific thing happening.
Yeah.
And
her line of the obelisk at Kittimer, the fields at Gettysburg, those were other people's memories too, but we don't honor them any less. Yeah, but they're not forcing me into like
I don't have to accidentally do Pickett's charge, like if when I go to Gettysburg,
this
like,
isn't making me watch Hamburger Hill against my will.
And if it was possible to like live in the moment of being doing Pickett's charge, that would be fine if that were possible and I elected to do so, right? If I gave my consent and said, I am willing to go through this experience to learn this lesson firsthand because I think it is a valuable and correct thing to do, which is the enlightened space person thing to do. But since that's not an option that's provided in the episode, and it's just either turn it off or turn it on, or keep it on, you turn it the fuck off. Like,
it's
not even hard.
That's not available to the Delta Quadrant's biggest asshole, Catherine Janeway, who just wants to be as big of a dick as possible at every turn. So they fix it up, and that's that. I do want to jump side. Do you have anything else about the end of this?
No. I just I've already kind of spoken all of my praise. Flashback sequences are great. The construction of the episode is I think, particularly of high quality. So
I agree. This is a very strong Harry episode. I want to throw him an MVP status. A dude just got off a 2-week way team mission and instantly jumps back into work, like fixing shit in the hallway. When he has his first hallucination, did you see him start breaking out the shitty warp effects from Twisted?
Oh yeah, I used to that kind of zoom in, zoom out. Like, oh yeah.
They started doing that. I was like, oh,
$2 camera trick.
But he goes into the sick bay, and the doctor's like, well, this is a result of over fatigue because you had to jump in and start being super ensign, and you're going to take 2 days off. And he tries to fight him, like, man, what a workplace where you've got people who are so eager to do their job that when offered a 2-day vacation, you're like, but no, I want to work more. And like, the only way to talk him out of it is to threaten an additional day off. Like, what a life of post-scarcity enlightened scientific
Well, we've talked about this before. I mean, this is the kind of person that would sign up to be out there, right? Like, if you weren't 150% wanting to actually be out there and doing the work, you wouldn't have signed up for Starfleet in the first place. You'd be on your pleasure planet with your fucking holodeck, fucking off forever, right? Like, these are the people who are the super eager, I want to be at work at 5 o'clock in the morning on my day off type of folks, That's why the Maquis people are so interesting, because they're not that. Like they're sort of greasy and and don't fit in, like that.
They
that
want
whole
to sleep in.
Yeah. That dynamic was so potentially interesting because of that.
But it is totally ridiculous that Harry Kim never does get promoted, especially once Paris is demoted.
Oh, there's a particularly egregious moment that's coming up in this season, and when we get there, I'm sure you'll have something to say about it.
Well, speaking of having something to say about something coming up.
Hold on. Can I do this one? Can I intro this one?
It's all yours, Joe.
Hold on, I need to. All right then there, brother. Let me tell you about the next episode of Star Trek Voyager we're going to be watching on this podcast. The most electrifying man in sports entertainment, Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson, will be making his appearance when 7 of 9 is kidnapped on an opportunistic ringmaster who forces her to participate in a Nordican blood sport. It's Season 6, Episode 15, Tsunazi!
Season sucks, man.
This episode is fun because it's like fun in a stupid way. Like this is not going to be high art, but I don't think it's not there's entertainment here, Peter.
As long as it's not the Doctor lip sync singing to a bunch of little assholes, I'll watch it.
This is way better than that. Like, it's, The Rock is cool. And he's in this episode. Like, this is actually one that Stevie watched back in the day. She said she saw this one because everyone did. We'll get into it more next week, but this is born of a corporate crossover. There's a whole backstory about why this exists that has to do with exactly what was happening in the year 2000 when it came to UPN. And they made this episode happen in the way that they did to accommodate that. So I'm looking forward to talking about it.
I'll be there, man. Sounds good.